Dear friends, as Secretary General of the Commission of the Bishops' Conference of the European Union, I welcome you all here today in our premises. What gathers us here today in this difficult situation we are living of the pandemic that affects us all and worries us. We heard today about this new variants and things are difficult. But what gathers here today is a joyful event and a much awaited event also. It's the launch of the new book of our friend, Father Edmond Grace. He's, as you know, responsible for ecology in the Jesuit European Social Center. The title of the book is Business and the Earth. Two things that sometimes we think are incompatible, cannot go together. This book instead is inspired a lot by a reflection on the Laudato Si, this encyclical letter of Pope Francis, I would say a prophetic encyclical letter, well, invites the business world to a dialogue, to open itself more to a more global view of the human experience, and not to base itself so much on short-term profit. See profit, it's a nice sentence in the book, see profit not as a goal, but as a sign of success. The publication of this book has been possible thanks to the sponsorship of UNIAPAC, the International Christian Union of Business Executives. And I welcome here today, also here with us, Rodrigo Whiteclaw. He is the Secretary General of UNIAPAC. And now we will start this launch of the book today here in COMECE with a video, a very short recording of our president, the Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich. He's now in Mexico for his commitments as General Relator of the Synod, but he in some way wanted to be present also to this event. He's also written the afterword to this book, and he's recorded a short video for us. So we'll hear it, we'll see it, and then I'll leave the floor to Edmond Grace. So welcome again, all of you, and thanks for being here. And thanks and welcome also to the people that are following us through the internet.
I am very happy of the presentation today of Father Grace's book in COMECE, and I welcome you all. Father Grace's book invites the world of business to consider the insights of Pope Francis in Laudato Si. He addresses himself primarily to those in this sphere of activity, but he argues that without the supervision of the political process, good business is subverted by the profiteer. This obsessive concern with making money is a matter of political concern because it leads inevitably to the exploitation of people and the destruction of the environment. It is also self-destructive. Pope Francis speaks of rapidification, a kind of mindless hyperactivity to which the world of business and finance is particularly prone. The recurring phenomenon of the financial bubble is the inevitable result of an obsession with profit above all else. The antidote, according to Pope Francis, is contemplation, which may at first sight seem quite removed from the world of business. Yet business at its best is creative, and creativity calls for that standing back and being still, which we associate with contemplation. The very name Laudato Si, praise you, reflects another reality which is missing from our frenetic contemporary culture. Praise is the capacity to say this is good, simply for the joy of saying it. When God created the world, he saw that it was good. And when we do something new, we are happy to stand back and react in a similar manner. In this, we are truly in God's image. In the world of the entrepreneur, this capacity to express one's joy in what has been created is important not just for the humanity of the entrepreneur, but for the human dignity of those who are employed in the enterprise, which results from the entrepreneur's achievement. Laudato Si is at first sight highly critical of business. Pope Francis condemns the damage being done to the environment by business corporations, but he also speaks of business as a noble vocation. Father Grace builds on this perspective by arguing that the primary motive of the entrepreneur is truly noble, to achieve something of worth to humanity. While profit has its part to play in every enterprise, its function is to serve as a measure of success and not as the underlying motive. Father Grace makes a thought-provoking point about the influence of business on the wider culture. It plays a pervasive role in everyday life. Every time we buy what we need, we engage with that world, and most people are employed by business enterprises. Because of this pervasive presence, the way in which business leaders understand their role has a profound effect on the way society understands itself. It also affects the way in which politicians and public servants see their role. In recent decades, the glorification of the profit motive has sent a powerful message to government. Stand aside and let business do what business does best. In the neoliberal worldview, what business does best is to make profit without regard to anything else, least of all to this planet which we all share. Father Grace seeks common cause with those in the business world who see their role as harnessing the resources of the earth. Just as it makes no sense to harness a beast of burden without also taking care of it, in the same way it makes no sense to use the resources of the earth in a way which lays waste the planet on which we all depend. Pope Francis speaks from the perspective of his Christian faith, partly to encourage those who look to him for spiritual guidance, but also because the dialogue which is needed if we are to overcome the challenge which we all face cannot exclude any aspect of human experience. If the world of business fails to engage in this all-embracing dialogue, the hunger for profit at all costs will ensure that our common home is laid waste, and that people throughout the world are exploited and oppressed. If, on the other hand, the world of business enters into the kind of open-ended dialogue envisaged in Laudato Si, it will have an irreplaceable role to play in human thriving. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and you're all very welcome. It's great to see you all here. Also, I'd like to welcome in particular our speakers. And firstly, I'd like to thank Father Manuel for the hospitality you've shown, not just today in having us all here and yourself and the staff of COMECE, but from the very first time I began to talk to you about this project. You have been very supportive, telling me that this premises itself will be available, approaching the Cardinal. That video we saw is a result of your goodwill and work, and I just want to say how much I appreciate it. So thank you very much. Now, our next speaker is coming through Zoom. John Bruton is a former Prime Minister of Ireland, and I am greatly honoured to have John here joining us. He actually was, it might be embarrassing him a little to say that he was first elected to the Irish Parliament at the ripe old age of 22, and was Minister for Finance at the age of 34. So he has a long and distinguished political career, including working with, as Taoiseach, with John Major on one of the fundamental documents of the Irish peace process. And at the same time, at the same period, as part of Ireland's presidency of the European Council, he negotiated the successful conclusion of the Stability and Growth Pact, which many of you might not have heard of, but you will be aware of the currency in your pocket, the euro, which the Stability and Growth Pact really was one of the final bricks in the wall in putting the euro into place. And finally, when he retired from active politics, he became the EU ambassador to Washington for 4 years. So, as I say, his career is very distinguished. I just want to say one personal memory I have of a talk he gave in Dublin at the Eucharistic Congress of 2012 on politics and theology, which I could see he brought a theological depth to what he was saying, which I suspect few politicians anywhere would equal. So, John, I'd like to hand the floor over to yourself, and you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Father Edmond, and it's a great honour for me to be, albeit virtually, on a platform of COMECE, a body whose input to European Union development I deeply appreciate, going back to the time when I was a member of the Convention on the Future of Europe, working with others, including COMECE, on setting in place the present Constitution of the European Union. I think the production of Father Edmond's book, Business and the Earth, could not be more timely, because it's coming out providing a theological and spiritual underpinning for a lot of development that's actually taking place simultaneously in the European Union. We're seeing, for instance, with the increasing emphasis as far as the financial industry is concerned on economic, social and governance, or environmental, social and governance issues, the need for companies and the requirement of companies to report on the environmental impact of what they're doing and the social impact of what they're doing. These requirements are now being demanded by those who want to invest in those companies, either through pension funds or through asset managers, or indeed as ordinary shareholders. People want to know that their money, whether it be the money that's going to provide them with a pension in later years, or money that they're now investing in order to save or to make some money themselves, that their money is being used for environmentally sustainable and socially sustainable purposes. And that legislation is now being developed on all of this in the European Union. So providing, as this book does, a philosophical underpinning for this important and imminent political work is very, very important. I think it is right, however, that we should recognize that what we're dealing with is not something easy or simple. We, in fact, as members of humanity, we have a choice. between a gradual disruption in our lives or a delayed but catastrophic disruption in our lives. The gradual disruption will come from the very substantial cost that will have to be incurred to make our economy sustainable. A lot of money is going to have to be invested in renewable sources of energy, renewable means of transport in place of the current means of transport and means of energy provision that we're using. This will cost a lot of money. It will mean money will have to be diverted away from consumption into investment. And while the money is diverted into investment, the returns will come, but come over a longer period, whereas we will obviously have to have some reduction in consumption in the short term. But this is inevitable. It's something we have to do, and we've got to mobilize people to enable it to happen. I'm not sure that the public in most countries are ready for the change that dealing with the climate is going to require, the change in their lives, in their lifestyles, and in the amount of money that they have to spend on day-to-day items, which may be reduced so that that money is made available for building a sustainable society. So preparing public opinion for the changes that are necessary, I think, is going to be substantial. I think there are a number of important quotations that I would like to draw from the book. I think Janez Potočnik has made a very important, a very simple statement. Every business has to be profitable to survive, but in the calculation of profit, every cost must be counted. The truth is, in the bottom line of most businesses at the moment, all that is counted is the enhancement in shareholder value. We've now got to recognize that the bottom line of business is not just shareholder value. The bottom line of business has to be the survival of the business and the survival of humanity, the survival of the earth as a habitable environment in which we can live. And introducing that broader concept of what business's bottom line should be is what's going on at the moment with environmental and social sustainability being included in the reporting requirements of businesses. And that's just the beginning of a major reorientation of business that is going to have to take place. Now, Father Grace, in his own remarks, made a point, I think, which is slightly critical of His Holiness, where he said, Pope Francis says nothing about how business might function at its best, but he is clear about the environmental responsibility of business and about the need for the political process to monitor the environmental impact of business. I think the Church does need to take an interest in how business is actually going to operate in a practical fashion. Profit is not bad. It depends entirely how you calculate profit and what you use profit to reward. Are you using the profit motive to reward environmentally friendly activity or environmentally unfriendly activity? And that's all a question of how you design, how you regulate capitalism. But to regulate capitalism in a fashion that will deliver good results requires a lot of intellectual engagement, a lot of policy engagement with business. Now, if I were to be critical of my own church, and I'm a practicing Catholic, I would say that it has kept its I kept business at arm's length, except when it obviously needs money for church purposes. It will approach those who have the money. But I don't think that the church, the Catholic Church, has taken enough interest in the actual day-to-day operation of business and how business can be made more fruitful. And I think what we're seeing at the moment, and I say this from my own experience since leaving politics of being involved in two major businesses, one an asset manager investing in bonds and produced by companies, and another in an actual manufacturing company, is that the pressure is increasing on business to demonstrate that it is helping the environment, that it is sustainable. This pressure is coming in the first place from its own employees. Young people entering a company are harder to recruit now. There's a labor shortage in Western countries. And the employees are demanding not just that they get a decent wage or salary, they're also demanding that their work be something that is seen to be socially and environmentally valuable. And if they're offered a job in another company where that other company is offering something that is more environmentally and morally valuable, they will leave their present company. So the retention of employees, I think, is going to be something that business will have to take into account in devising an environmentally satisfying program of work for their employees if they want to keep their employees. And that's something that I think surprised me a little, that younger people are so demanding that business, if they are to work in that business, does this sort of thing. Also, obviously, businesses' customers are demanding that the products have been produced sustainably. Although, I'm not so sure how powerful that is. If people are short of money, they'll buy the cheaper product, even if the environmental effect is not as great as one might have hoped. And then there's a third area where business is under pressure to be environmentally sustainable, and that is from those whom it wishes to attract as investors. Investors are increasingly, when they're in dialogue with the chief executive of companies or chairman of companies, they're demanding to know what the environmental impact is of that, what the business is doing and what the business is doing with the money that pension funds and others might invest in the business. Now, I think it is important to be positive about the role of business rather than to be just critical, because in a way, business is the driving force in society that gets things done. It makes things happen. Business has that can-do, get it done attitude. It's always looking for new opportunities, and that it has that positive dimension. So I think it's important to work closely with business if we're to achieve our objectives. Obviously, Father Grace's publication is not the only publication on this subject that's been published in recent times. And I have recently been reading the major document, pastoral letter on the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, which has been produced by the Archbishop of Dublin, Archbishop Dermot Farrell. Now, I'm not mentioning him just because he used to be the parish priest of my own parish before he was promoted to be Archbishop of Dublin. I'm mentioning him because of something I think profound that he says. And he says, and I quote, "Among the greatest dangers of the climate crisis is the loss of hope and the inaction that follows in its wake. We have to do so much to prevent a climate disaster in so many fields and in so many parts of the world simultaneously that we lose hope. And in a way, in some respects, hope is the greatest of all virtues. You have to have hope, and we need the inspiration, the spiritual inspiration of our Christian faith to give us not only charity, and obviously protecting the climate is an act of charity, particularly those in climatically challenged parts of the world. We need faith to inspire us and to enable us to look beyond the narrow focus of our own time on earth to the time on earth of future generations. But above all, if we are to get action here and now and to mobilize ourselves to take action here and now, we need the virtue of hope. And I think business, in the way it works, the can-do attitude that it has, is the mechanism that can offer us hope. And we need, I think, as the church needs, to work very closely with business, encouraging business, not always being critical of business, recognizing that the profit motive can be harnessed for good as well as for ill, and emphasizing the importance of harnessing for good. So for all of those reasons, I'm delighted to have had this opportunity of being involved in the launch of Father Edmond's book, and I congratulate and thank him for it, and I look forward to hearing the other contributors to the discussion. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, John, for your wide-ranging talk and reflection. And also, I think for finishing up on that theme of hope, which I think no one here would disagree with, that it is how we encourage, how we raise hope, how we motivate people is going to be one of the key challenges we face. So thank you very much. Now, I'm very happy to have our next speaker, who is here with us, Janez Potočnik. His foreword to my book brings it really into a new dimension in terms of the dialogue between the church and the wider society. And also, I'd like to just say too at this occasion how greatly I benefited from his interest and friendship in writing the book. I felt a great personal support and interest from him. And I've been greatly appreciative of that. Just to give you some idea of his background, from 1998 to 2004, he led the Slovenian delegation for entry into the European Union. And then when this entry finally went to Slovenia and the other countries, 10 countries at that stage, entered, he became the first Slovenian member of the European Commission, firstly Commissioner for, I think, Research, but then Commissioner for the Environment. Now, since then, he's gone on to acquire what one acquaintance of mine has described as rock star status in the global ecological movement. To put that slightly more prosaically, among other things, he is the co-chair of the International Resource Panel of the United Nations Environment Programme. So, Janez, again, thank you very much for writing the foreword and for coming along here today. And just now hand the floor over to yourself. And thank you.
Thanks, Edmond. Dear Edmond, dear friends, it's a privilege being here today, and also it was a privilege for providing the foreword to this book. 9 points which I would like to share with you. The first is about the importance of understanding of the world in which we are currently living. We are the first generation ever on this planet which is living in socio-ecological space of planetary scope. There has been none before us. If you look it through the climate change challenge, health challenge, internet, trade, traveling, we called First and Second World War world wars, but they were actually many regional wars on many places which were connected to something joint. So understanding that means that we are more interconnected and interdependent than ever, and that our individual and collective responsibility has enormously increased. Second point, there are some really important signs of hope and also impact and awareness which we can see on global but also on European level. On the global level, the most important was the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and on European Green Deal. But understating the importance of the Pope Francis Laudato Si would be total mistake, because I think it was extremely impactful. So if I would use the words of John before, Pope providing us hope. And I think that was an extremely important contribution. Just to share with you an anecdote, I was a keynote in one of the major conferences in Vatican, And I actually gave the almost 1 hour speech presenting the whole story. And at the end, I've done the conclusions based on the speech, which were the quotes from Laudato Si, and nobody noticed. So I told them at the end that these were actually Laudato Si quotes, which were the conclusions, so that they understand the importance of what is actually written there. By the way, John, you might not remember, but you were the chair of the Resource Efficiency Roundtable, which I was.
Very well remember.
Yeah, that was, and by the way, this was the beginning of circular economy in Europe, in the world, and it was actually, so you can consider absolutely yourself as some of the fathers of European Green Deal, because that was the beginning. So, as you have heard from Edmond, my current work is focusing on the management of natural resources. When we say natural resources in International Resource Panel, we mean everything extracted from earth, biomass, metals, non-metallic minerals, and fossil fuels, plus land and water. And why we think that focusing on natural resources is so important. Only extraction and processing of natural resources can be, according to our research, connected to 90% of land-related biodiversity loss, 90% of water stress, half of climate change, and 1/3 of air pollution. If I give you just one example, if you buy the car, park it for the whole life, and not drive it, you have already caused 1/3 of air pollution, because resources needs to be extracted, because the car needs to be produced. So it is essential, and we have to understand that natural resources are actually going to the core where the problem lies. They are the one which are actually at the end resulting in the economic results of the companies, how they use them efficiently. But on the other hand, if you use them inefficiently, they are resulting in climate change, in pollution, in biodiversity loss, and health implications. So focusing on how we manage natural resources, it's a real sign of hope. Why? Because through that, you can address all the crises simultaneously. And you don't need some specific approaches. Fourth point, which I would like to do, why we are struggling with transition efforts. And I will give you the example of the recently concluded conference in Glasgow. I will not talk about lack of political leadership because that's quite obvious. But what is in essence the real problem? All the efforts in Glasgow were actually focused on greening, optimizing current economic system. It's important indeed, but it will not do the trick. This will not deliver 1.5, it will not deliver relation with environment on the proper level. So we need a deep system rethinking and change. Second, policy responses are mainly addressing the supply side problems. So they are focused on optimizing greening, cleaning the supply chains and services, ignoring again the need for a deep system change and ignoring the fact of the overconsumption, in particularly in rich part of the world. So what would be the difference and what would be my advice if they would deal with, for example, they deal with greening the steel. And their task is greening the steel, providing the steel industry with the renewable energy and cleaning the exhaust. That's the logic. But my first question would be how much of that steel is actually used in inefficiently used cars which are standing on the street? How much of that steel is used in unoccupied space in our places in which we are living? Can we replace that steel with maybe some lighter material? And can we maybe reorganize cities in the first place in a way that we will not need so much mobility, but it will be more on walk, cycling, or public transport? So going back and then asking ourselves how much of that steel still needs to be cleaned. I think it's essential if we want really to provide the core regions. And this is actually creating lasting tensions between the high-income and low-income countries. Why? Because we are not addressing the core problems of why they are where they are, also of the social inequality development and so on. And this is leading then to something which I can predict now for the future. Since the low-income countries will not see the way through, they will actually require more and more financial assistance, which is important, but it will not solve the problem. And lastly, everything is to a certain extent happening in climate energy bubble. So there is nobody from really industry, agriculture, transport, trade, social matters, finance, everything which would need to be consulted in that transition. And all those important ministers who basically hold the answers to those questions, but they are not there and they will never be there. So it's really important to address those issues in a systemic manner, which leads me to the main reasons of the crisis, which were already very nicely addressed also from the Taoiseach Bruton. So let me put it like that. You know that the economic theory, I'm, by the way, a professor of economics. So the economic theory is teaching us that us, producers and consumers, behave rationally, which is, by the way, true. We behave rationally. But the signals which we receive are actually leading us that we behave rationally for now, for us in this moment. Because the signals which we are sending to producers and consumers on the markets are that production, financial capital is overvalued and over-rewarded, human capital is undervalued and under-rewarded, and natural capital is not valued at all. So with these signals, when we behave short-term rationally, we are actually creating on the long-term a total crisis situation, which we are now seeing in many areas. So if I would summarize it, I would say that this is leading to something like Arto Pasilina, one of the authors. If you haven't read it, it's really good. The Finnish author, he nicely put it in the title of his book. This is leading to a charming mass suicide. Exactly that. And that's why it is essential to focus on the market signals which we are sending to us as those who are actors on the markets. What would all that mean in policy terms? Redefining consumption from owing to using. We don't need cars, we need mobility. You don't need chair, you need to sit. You don't need light bulbs, you need light, and so on. Redefining production from mass sales to providing efficient functionalities. Redefining core economic incentives such as taxation, subsidies, public procurement. Integrating well-being as an objective across all the policies. Measuring sustainability with a life cycle perspective. Harmonizing it across policies. Activating existing financial potential, all to allow that transition. Looking at innovation in categories of these economic ecosystems to provide societal functions rather than in categories of production sectors, and I could continue. One thing is clear, this transition to a more sustainable world will fly or fall on questions related to social acceptance. Nothing which is not socially acceptable will be adopted. You can provide whatever good policy you wish. If it will not be acceptable, it will not fly. That's why it's really important to understand that environmental and social transition are two sides of the same coin. It will not go without addressing the questions related to more equity, more equality, gender included, more addressing more the care for most vulnerable. And another thing which is part of that story is that since we are terribly indebting the future generations economically, but also by depleting the natural capital, we need to have a kind of agreement, a pact with some intergenerational agreement through which we will collectively acknowledge our responsibility and give them the real hope, because that's what we would need. They are really the real barriers of hope, because they are sometimes we really are not understanding how well they understand the importance of that for their future lives, and we should help them. This leads me finally to you, Edmond, to your book. First, thank you for the book. Second, by titling it Business and the Earth, you have acknowledged the critical importance of the business for our lives, and I think that's absolutely correct. But it's important also that business is in dialogue with the whole breadth of human experience, thrive while contribute to the common good. And I sincerely hope that this book will provoke the debate, which will put humanism in the center. We need to move from maximizing the amount of products on the markets measured through the GDP growth to maximizing functionalities, human needs, and measuring that through the well-being. This is essential. Because if the North Star is wrong, I have many times said already that for me, GDP, one can explain it in a way like, you will not reach the goal walking faster if you are walking in the wrong direction. So that's the point. So I'm closing. According to the recent Dasgupta review, and Dasgupta review is about economics of biodiversity, we basically have two major failures to address. One is the institutional failure, and the second is the failure of contemporary economics to acknowledge that we humans are part of nature and not external to it. And this leads us to the most fundamental question which we have to agree. Do we agree that we humans are part of nature too? Because if we will agree about that, then of course many of the behavior which we do will follow suit. So if somebody still is not convinced how important that is, since we are in Belgium, I will use for the closing the quote of the most famous Belgian, that's the Hercule Poirot, the famous detective. When he was once asked why he's speaking about himself in the third person, his reply was, if somebody is so intelligent as I am, you have to establish a healthy distance towards yourself. So that's actually what is the challenge for us humans. We have to establish a healthy distance towards ourselves, because with that, we will establish also a responsible attitude via future generations, and not only via future generations, but by all living beings with whom we share the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janez. It just reminded me of when I sent you a copy of the book first, and you just asked the question, what do you say about resource management? I thought, no, I wasn't sure what I said about resource management. But the longer I've looked into that issue, the more crucial it is. Everything we wear, everything we're going to eat in a few moments, this whole building, it's all come out of the earth, nowhere else. And just if we don't pay attention to that, this is something I've learned actually from Janez, that well, we're walking in the wrong direction. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you very much. Our next speaker is Rodrigo Whiteclaw, Managing Director of UNIAPAC, and UNIAPAC is the body which has published this book. You'll see it mentioned there. And obviously, I'm deeply grateful for this, and also for the support that Rodrigo has given me, and over the number of months since we've met. UNIAPAC is a network of Christian business leaders associations, a global network from 40 different countries, with 45,000 business executives involved in these different organizations. So it's a huge endorsement, most impressive network that we have access to. And I know certainly, Rodrigo is very well. I'll let him say what he's got to say rather than say what repeat. He's already been speaking to me. But so, without further ado, Rodrigo, I invite you to take the floor. Thank you.
Dear Edmond, dear friends, I feel deeply honored to be invited to intervene in the launching of the book Business and the Heart, and I thank you, Edmond, for the invitation. I will start my presentation by a reflection made at the end of the book by Cardinal Hollerich. I fully agree that the true test of this book will be seen on how it is received in the world of business. I have to say that I am pleasantly surprised by the reading of the book. It is primarily a deep reflection on Laudato Si and a call for dialogue between the business world, the political world, and the other actors of the society. The book is aimed at the business world. Its relevance is explained first because it recognizes the business world as a key and irreplaceable actor in the transforming process that the world requires for its survival. Through his knowledge of the business world, Edmond is able to touch the souls of the business leaders through respect, delicate pedagogy, and smart psychology. It is an elegant book that challenges and enlightens at the same time, but sometimes it shows a voluntarist vision. He opens the mind to new horizons in terms of language. He defines some concepts in a clear and very useful way, such as dialogue, trust, work, care, contemplation, praise, rapidification, steward of creation, solicitude, sloth, money, and humanity, that we need to work with, and it is so necessary to be applied in our personal and professional life. Edmond also makes a very subtle analysis of the relationship between politics and economy. The book is critical at times, in line with the analysis of Laudato Si. Beyond that, I consider that it has a positive and encouraging vision of the contribution what the corporate world can do for humanity. It comes to reinforce the call of Laudato Si to the continual conversion at personal, corporate, and community levels. I want to put special emphasis on the reflection of the book, showing that the cause of the social and environmental degradation are intrinsically related, and they cannot be dissociated, and on the way of doing business, considering the link between social inequality, the fragility of the planet, the use of technology, and the responsibilities of the business leaders. The responsibility of the business leader, which is critical in the creation and distribution of wealth, in the rational use of natural, financial, and technological resources, in the production and the provision of goods and services, and to offer decent work for the greatest number of people. In that sense, I believe that the book is a constructive, hopeful, and challenging call for the transformation of the business into a noble vocation. A vocation is noble means that we are blessed with something extraordinary, but it also means that we have an enormous responsibility to ensure that our noble vocation will produce noble results. While UNIAPAC was involved in the edition of this book, the book is very complementary to the work carried out by UNIAPAC in recent years, and a valuable contribution to the understanding and operationalization of Laudato Si. I would like to mention the document co-edited by UNIAPAC and the Dicastery for the Promoting Human Development in 2018, The Vocation of the Business Leader, and also the project, The Future of Work, Labor After Laudato Si. This international project was coordinated by ILO and supported by the Vatican. UNIAPAC participated over the last 4 years in this project in 3 lines of work: academic, research, and capacity building. The mention of the encyclical Laudato Si, the ecological, social, demographic crisis, and technological change, the future of work, and the role of the private sector in the transformation process, particularly in terms of leadership and entrepreneurship. And also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, the Goal 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. UNIAPAC will try whatever in its remit of influence to carry the voice of this publication into the world. We will ensure the dissemination towards our members. We recognize that business has a true mission to contribute to the dialogue. Christian business leaders have the responsibility, in cooperation with governments and civil society, including trade unions, to find common response to the global crisis with a transformative perspective in the promotion of integral ecology and integral human development, and to make business activity a noble vocation and build a more just, prosperous, and responsible society. Our collaboration with Edmond allows us to conclude there is a lot of work ahead of us. We, UNIAPAC, are a small portion of the business world, and only dialogue will get us where we need to go. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rodrigo, for your very encouraging and generous words. I particularly note your quoting of Cardinal Holrich's statement about the success of this book is about how it connects with the business world. I think that is the big challenge, which I would see myself as facing, and hopefully with your help responding to. Because, yeah, it is how we develop this wider dialogue is going to be the big challenge. We're coming towards the end of our session. There's 2 people, further people I need to thank, one of whom is here, Peter Rosic, Director of JESC, because Peter was the one who suggested to me that I should take a paper that I had delivered at an event organized in the European Parliament and build it up to something more substantial and get a publisher. So, Peter, thank you very much. And one final person who is not here, but 2 people from his firm, Sustainable Public Affairs, are here. Willem Bristendorp. Willem read Laudato Si a few years ago, and he was so enthused, he phoned the then papal nuncio, Monsignor Le Beaupin, who put him in touch with us in JESC. And really, this book is the outcome of the conversation which began then. His initial enthusiasm was really what launched this whole process. I want to put, say, I've mentioned, actually, he's mentioned in the book itself, but how much I greatly appreciated his interest, his friendship, his encouragement over the years, and hopefully that I know that will continue. So, but anyway, so what have I got to say about this now famous publication? And I won't spend too long saying it. I think we're reaching our sort of optimum time and space, and we have a little bit of lunch for you waiting, so we don't want to delay that. I'll just tell you maybe some things that I learned in the process of writing this book, which I really kind of got inside me. And the first was this question of contemplation, how the call in Laudato Si to slow down, look, let things sink in. How it is very much ad rem to the reality of business. It's not something that sort of the church can kind of bring in and say, look, would you like to look at this? It's really part of the, I give you an incident recently, an experience I had, talking with a man who runs a business which has been in his family for a number of generations. And he was talking about handing over to his son, not the business, but the capacity to make good investment decisions. How do you do that? And he was talking very much, he was really in the realm of intuition, of inspiration, of something intangible. And having to slow down and assess, I would, with my Jesuit background, talk about discernment. But whatever it was, it really resonated, I think, with this whole question of the contemplation. And so just that's one thing I learned, okay? And the second is very close to it. And it's this, that really fundamental to business, the world of business, and to the value of business in human society is the motive, which is not profit. Profit, I think someone else was mentioning, I think maybe you did, profit is a measure of success. But the fundamental motive of business is worthwhile achievement. I think if you talk to people who have, built up a business, it's what they've achieved. It's not the money they've made. It's what's been done. And that enables them to employ people, not just in a functional way, but that they're part of an enterprise, that there really is a healthy culture here. So that question of what is of worth is at the heart. And the third, related to that is this: we owe nothing to people who have made big profits. We owe a great deal to people who have provided us with food, drink, clothing, buildings we live in and work in, with all the commodities and services that go to make up our daily lives. We owe a great deal to those people. And likewise, today, we owe a great deal to those who are looking for ways to get all these realities provided for in a sustainable and environmentally responsible and commercially viable way. We don't owe anything to those who, in the name of business or economy or the market, tries to impede that with all kinds of ingenuity and formidable resources. We don't owe them anything. So that's the second one. The third element, the third issue that came up to me was what's the value of dialogue? It's a very vague sort of thing in a way. Now, one of the images I use, and actually Janez in his introduction, in his foreword, takes it up, is the image of harnessing the earth, actually using the resources of the earth, but harnessing the earth. And really harnessing something that connects us to the world of the domestic animal, the beast of burden, whom does work for us. But if it does work for us, we've got to care for it, because if we don't care for it, it can't work. So that image of harnessing, I'm rather proud of, actually, if I may say so myself. But I've just started asking myself, where did that come from? Because it's not there actually in the data C, this image of harnessing. The word harness isn't used. But actually, in one part of Laudato Si, there's one reference. It's a part that talks about sacramentality and rest. Okay, again, very far removed from the world of business, seemingly. But it just talks about the law of Moses, says you must rest on the Sabbath day because your ox and your donkey needs to rest. Now, I found that rather charming. It's made a big impact on me. The point is this, that as we engage in dialogue, we should be open to the donkey moments, something that seems quite trivial, just passing by, but in fact may have the power to totally transform the way we think. So at that thing, I think we'll just bring matters to a conclusion. We've been here for more than an hour. I'd like to thank you all very much for coming. And hopefully the conversations that we can have now and afterwards will continue. So thank you all very much. Thank you.